Hey guys, it's Nico from Steel City Vintage, and today's video we will be talking about two vintage Cartier that we just got into our watch shop, including one that I feel is the absolute best value in the vintage Cartier watch market today. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Starting us off, we have a Cartier Santos Dumont reference 96054. But before we get into this specific watch, let's start off with a little history. The original Santos Dumont was released in 1904 per Santos Dumont's request, as he wanted a wristwatch to accompany him on his flights. So yes, while technically a pilot's watch, this version is anything but. I mean, just look at its luxurious and premium case construction, its ultra-thin movement. It is far, far removed from that original request. However, in my opinion, does retain some of that industrialized look with the exposed screws. Now, in typical Cartier fashion, this Santos Dumont was released in very, very low production numbers, with watches being produced in batches and released sporadically and sparingly throughout the first 6 decades. That lasted up until 1973, when everything changed. Cartier made an important acquisition, relocated their factory, and the company as a whole began to take a much more modern look, with industrialization of their production and a more streamlined approach for their offerings. Now, something else also happened in 1973. Cartier released what they called their Louis Cartier collection, which comprised of 12 models, some new, some old, all with a more revamped, streamlined approach consisting of precious metal cases, some of which were offered in large and small models respectively, and many of which featured a ETA Cartier branded caliber 78. Now, the watch that we have in front of us was actually not part of that original Louis Cartier collection. Rather, it is its successor of the original Santos Dumont. This is a watch that we refer to as the ultra thin. Now, you may have also heard it explained as an extra plate or an extra flat, but if that confuses you, just go back to the ultra thin explanation, as these three terms are pretty much synonymous with each other and are used interchangeably. Now, being its successor, it is an upgrade in many facets, and not just because it's an ultra thin. Its case features a more luxurious construction, and it has an upgraded movement over that ETA base 2512 to the Frederic Piguet 21. Now, despite this movement being significantly thinner, it boasted around the same amount of power reserve, while also illustrating a much more aesthetically pleasing finishing to the movement overall. This watch, being limited to roughly 1,600 examples only, makes it a very, very rare watch to hold, and it is honestly a pleasure to handle in the hand. We are very, very pleased to offer this watch in our vintage watch shop and think it is worthy of your consideration. Moving on to our second watch, we have a Cartier Centree small size, also referred to as 7 lines, dating to 1968. Now, bear with me. If we were to use the analogy that Cartier is a bar, then the Tank Louis is their signature cocktail. It's the one that gets everybody in the door, and it is the cocktail that keeps everybody coming back for more. The Centree? Well, that's Cartier's top shelf. Adorned by Cartier's most exclusive clients, it was the Cartier crash before the crash even existed. It was reserved for the most exclusive of celebrities, and when you were to wear one of these in the 1920s, you walked in making a statement. Think about the time. In the 1920s, men and women alike were wearing very, very small wristwatches. So if you're walking into a room, especially with one of the large size Centrees, you were making a statement. Now, this is the watch that I think is the best value in vintage Cartier today. But let me explain why. Let's first start with the size. Now, Having the 7 line or small size designation would already put off many prospective buyers, but I would caution you to take a closer look. The Tank Louis Cartier measures at 23 millimeters wide by 30 millimeters in height, contrasted with the small size Centree that's 18 millimeters wide by 34 millimeters in length. So, whatever width we're giving up millimeters wise, we're gaining back in length. What this translates to on the wrist, in my experience, is a larger wrist presence. It wears bigger on the wrist, as you can see in this side-by-side comparison. To go along with the size, my second argument of why I think that this is such a value proposition right at this moment is its rarity. Now, don't get me wrong. Anything prior to 1973 that has to do with Cartier is an objectively rare watch. In fact, its rarity honestly can't be overstated. However, if we were to take a look at total production numbers from, let's say, the Paris house alone, the Tank would make up a majority of those watches produced, contrasted with the Centree that was produced in far, far fewer examples. Now, my third reason is the price. If we're gonna take an apples to apples comparison, then a 1968 Tank Louis would range in the $18,500 to $21,000 range, depending on condition and completeness of set. Taking a look at a small size Centree, which you can get for several $1,000s cheaper. So, to summarize, you have a watch that wears larger and has more presence on the wrist, that was produced in far fewer examples when compared to a Tank Louis Cartier. All that for several $1,000s cheaper, in my opinion, makes this watch an absolute no-brainer. And if you're able to find one, you should grab one up. Now, in all honesty, I am still contemplating whether to put this watch up for sale or to keep it and put it in my own private collection. However, if you are interested in this watch or any other watch for that matter, I would encourage you to take a look at our vintage watch shop, as we are trying to constantly curate important and interesting rare pieces all the time. As always, I would appreciate if you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, turn on those notifications so that way you can be the first to know when videos drop, and we always appreciate your support. Thank you guys. I'll catch you in the next one.